Hello, everyone. Welcome to our class. Today, we're going to talk a bit more about strategic sourcing. And for doing so, the idea of this class today is to understand how to establish a strategic sourcing in a very easy and perhaps more applicable way. Let me share with you a PowerPoint so that it's going to be perhaps a bit easier to comprehend. So, first of all, when thinking about strategic sourcing, we have to keep in mind how companies create value for the shareholder. So, there are two ways for doing this. The first one is by increasing revenues, being more profitable. That's the first point, the starting point. And the second one is by decreasing costs. So we can support, as strategic partners, we can support um, the shareholders' satisfaction, I would say, or the objectives of the company by raising prices, increasing volume in a way to support increased revenues. But in purchasing strategy specifically, we can, for instance, optimize the cost of the process in the purchasing strategy and waste of time, waste of money that we have been getting. Optimize the cost of goods and service, and also optimize the cost of employees, downsize. So specifically, what we're going to talk here is about optimizing costs and service, being more efficient, being more um, straightforward. As were talking before, there are determinants of value that will support us to optimize costs and avoid hidden costs, right? So the first step is to translate the objectives of the organizations into goals. So we have here our strategic alignment from the corporate strategy development, procurement strategy development, and also understanding the supply market. And by doing this, we have also to comprehend, to deploy all these strategies in a procurement strategy, and a strategy that our team and purchasing will be able to implement and getting clear indicators how we are going to measure the success of the business. If our strategies, our process are being correct for the business as a whole. Okay. All right. So anyway, what is strategic sourcing? So for understanding this, we have to exploit this into three different perspectives. One is the procurement operations. So we are talking about all operations by placing an order, identifying the need, create a purchase order, following up, coordinating delivery, receiving goods. So there's an operation to that we call procurement. So placing orders that could be do manually, or it can be done also by the computer. Another strategy is the vendor management. So we are going to define strategies to create and refine our suppliers, or starting new relationships, identify some performance expectations, manage risk of the suppliers, and manage the performance of the suppliers as well. And what we're talking about, strategic sourcing, is all process that we are evaluating the spend analysis, the management of the demand, the sourcing strategy, what will be our approach to negotiate the contracts, how we are going to qualify the suppliers, and how we are going to manage this contracts, right? There are several tools that can support us, so we can do aggregation, categorization, outsourcing, relationship management, and standardization. What does that mean? When we're talking about aggregation, we are talking about joint quantities, joint batches to reduce price per purchase, right? So we are going to be perhaps more efficient, more assertive, but we are reducing the number of the transactions. So instead of placing weekly orders, I can place a contract and ask the supplier to provide weekly deliveries, okay, instead of sending order every single day. Categorization is a way that we classify the requirements of our organization to promote some expertise, some market knowledge, or some innovation. For example, we can get a set of orders only focused on service, for instance. So I'm going to have someone in my team that will be expert in service, some kind of expertise in service. We can get another group only focused on rubber, for example. They can get, they know the market, they know how to buy rubber, they know how to develop new suppliers, and so far and so on. So we can categorize by commodity, for example, or raw material, someone only in charge of maintenance parts, for example. Another tool is what we call outsourcing. And in this case, we are trying, perhaps, we are sending to a third party all expertise for the purchasing. And there are some organizations that they don't have the purchasing department, they outsource this purchasing department, they contract, they only receive the material. Depending on the business, is a way to evaluate that. I personally, I don't like that much, but anyway. Another one is the relationship management. So it's a way that we are going to focus. We're going to have a specific class only focus on that, how we are going to share information, share knowledge, identify the better approach based on the level of commitment or level of importance that this supplier has to us, and the frequency of orders that we are going to place, right? So, for instance, we have some friends, a few friends, perhaps 3, 5 friends, but we have a lot of colleagues. What we're gonna do is that we have to get a very good relationship with our colleagues, but trust and some particular information we only share with some friends. You know what I mean? So that's the way, perhaps we're going to translate this for supply and relationship management later on. And the last one is standardization, a very interesting way to optimize strategic sourcing. Is instead of getting every single stuff tailor-made for your organization, try to find in the market some standards, something that you can easily buy, easily find out, if possible, whenever is possible, okay? There are several different strategies adopted by organizations. Here we have one example that is adopted by Braskem, a very big oil industry in the chemical and oil industry in South America. And they have 8 steps because of the business, right? So all the strategic sourcing from the starting point to the end demands from 5 to 6 months. Is that a strategy for Braskem? We don't need to use exactly the same. Our starting point here will be based on 5 steps only. The first one is building the team. So what we're gonna do is to develop the scope of the work, the plan, who is gonna be the team that will be involved, what will be the outputs, what will be the work plan for our strategy. Secondly, we're going to do a market research. I'm going to explain in detail in the coming minutes. Further, the strategy itself, development, how we can classify suppliers, how can we define the best sourcing approach to them, then contract negotiation, and in the end, how we are going to keep this relationship with the supplier. Is a kind of a continuous improvement process, okay? Firstly, building the team. So we have to hire people. You have to get the right persons in charge, trained and able to work in your team to find out the best strategy. And we have to define responsibilities for every single member of the team. By doing this, we also need to comprehend, so that's the first lesson here. We have to comprehend the stakeholders. What is the needs, the power, and the business importance of all? So for doing this, um, we need to understand the cross-functional. Remember, purchasing is not an island. We need to get some connections inside the company and outside the company. So it's a cross-functional strategy. um, we have to develop some strong supply market knowledge. It's not only based on our business, our company, but for example, if I'm working in electronic industry, a company that have been manufacturing televisions, for example, I can be, if I'm from sales department, I can be an expert in television. But if I belong to the purchasing department, I can try to, I'm not going to be an expert perhaps on television, but I have to be an expert of the material that are component for the television, right? I don't need to be an engineer for doing this, but I need to develop capabilities to source, to connect people, to get the experts in touch with the experts, and make things happen. You know what I mean? So we have to engage people, share data, and that's the basics that we have to consider. Further, we have to comprehend the business. We were talking about understanding our own business, but we have to understand the supplier's market. So again, if I'm buying rubber, I have to understand the market competitiveness, and I have to understand our purchasing power. For example, if I'm a very small company, I understand that I don't have a strong power to purchase, so understand that perhaps I'm going to negotiate with powerful suppliers than me. But even though that I belong to a very big company, perhaps a multinational enterprise, this organization perhaps can buy, a few batches of rubber. It's not the core business. So in that case, I don't have also a strong power because I know there are other organizations that have been buying much more than me. So I don't have a competitive advantage on that. So what we're going to do in this case, firstly, we have to understand. Let's try to, I believe that you know this tool, the Michael Porter 5 forces model. So we are going to use this model to understand the supply market. Okay, it's not the business that you belong to, but the business that you are buying from. So here we are going to consider, for example, rubber or sugar. Imagine that we are in a candy factory and I'm going to buy sugar. Firstly, I have to understand the buyer's bargaining power. What does it mean? So how is my power to buy this? It's based on the volume that I have. If I am a very big organization, multinational enterprise, have been buying tons and tons of sugar, that will be great. Or if I am, for instance, Coca-Cola or PepsiCo, we know that they have been buying tons and tons of sugar to their business, right? So I understand the bargaining power, my bargaining power based on the forecasting I have, the demand that I have to attend my customers, and the total volume that I have. On the other side, I have to understand the supplier bargaining power. And in that case, I also need to comprehend who else would be potential suppliers to this. And this side, as the buyer's bargaining, I have to understand how many guys I have been competing to buy sugar, right? So it's perhaps not only the candy industry, sugar can be sold also to the pharmaceutical industry, for instance. But I understand exactly who I am, no matter the size of my company, but, based on the volume that I have been buying. And suppliers bargaining power, I have to comprehend how competitive is this market, how many players they have. It's a single market, the monopolistic markets, all right, I understand. I don't have, even though that I'm buying tons and tons, the supplier is a single source, so their bargaining power will be higher than mine. But it's a very, or in the other side, perhaps can be a very competitive markets. There are a lot of farmers selling sugar in the market, and I can buy any one of that. I don't have any specific requirement to do it. So I understand that I have different alternatives. If the business is not going well with one, I can easily change to another one. It's not that issue. Um, Here there are two threads that we have to consider. One is that should I change if allow it? Imagine that the market faces a kind of a crisis. Is that possible for my business to change or make any kind of modification in the specification? Again, purchasing itself is not allowed to do any kind of a change, but I can work with the technical department to standardize this or to change or to refine the specification in a way that I can find out better or more alternatives in the market, right? That's the idea of substitute or improving the quality of the specification. And another one is threats from new entrants. For example, imagine that I'm buying sugar in local market and I know there are very good prices in South America, and I would like to develop those suppliers. What would be the threats for these new entrants? One of them, if you're talking about importing from South America, we know that is freight, customs clearance, and duties, and higher transit times. Does it pay? If it does, that sounds great. If not, it's not a possibility. Another kind of perhaps we can get, for instance, if you're talking about the pharmaceutical industry, perhaps you can get, we need an FDA approval, pre-approval to import chemical product from another country, for example. So I have to understand exactly what are the entrance barriers. That's a way to understand the market competitiveness, okay? How we collect data. There's so many ways that we can do it. So there's a lot of information that we have to collect. So the total annual purchase volume, we have to know our total annual volumes. We have to talk to with our stakeholders to identify the best possible forecast. We can do some external market research, trying to find key new suppliers, some data trends, some data analysis, some regulatory issues. So for doing this analysis, we have to do some research. We have to know a bit more. Again, strategic sourcing is not something that we are going to do to everything. We're going to do to something that is valuable for our business. We have to compare, contrast data, identify multiple sources, check annual reports, category managers, other suppliers, a lot of information, as much as possible, but again, based on reliable information, okay? Not on gossip, right? Okay. Secondly, we have to understand our purchasing power. So as a kind of a self-evaluation, in that case, we can say internally, we're going to use the SWOT analysis for doing this. So in one side, we're going to evaluate everything that is internal, that it's inside our company that is helpful for the business and it's harmful for the business. For example, something that is helpful and I can manage this is I have a very high volumes. So that's very important. Or harmful is that we are facing a very important crisis and I'm out of money. I don't have cash. So I cannot pay for developing a new supplier. I cannot pay for charges for that. External, we can talk about opportunities and threats. So for instance, brand new opportunities for us is something that it's a kind of an attribute from the environment, something that we cannot manage, we cannot define, but we can take some advantage of that. For example, imagine that the United States decides to address some foreign trade agreements with Ghana, for example, to import and export. Can take some advantage if we have, for instance, we identify some suppliers in Ghana. Or in the other side, also again in the United States, got several issues with China, and United States decided to increase import taxes from China. That is a threat for our business, right? We cannot manage this. We cannot say, oh, Mr. President, I'm sorry, I don't agree with your decision. Okay, you're going to say, right. So we cannot do it. So we can recognize this as a threat, right? Further, we have to understand our cost structure. So let's evaluate our cost and our supplier cost. We are going to evaluate what we call a spend analysis. So based on the commodity, I mean, if you're talking about, we have here a set of commodities that we have in this fictitious company. Here we have the suppliers, here's the annual spend. Remember that we are talking about how much money we have been spent annually. And here we separate in groups. So for instance, again, groups that can be manageable, right? So here, groups based on graphic design or paper or, several different, we can consolidate this and get spend analysis and spend evaluation. We can do some graphics and evaluate suppliers by category. For example, the number of suppliers and the volume of spend that we have been getting with every single supplier, or the spend by category. So we can do several different graphs just to make sure that we understand the business, that we understand what we are buying. We have to be confident on that. Later on, we are going to evaluate what we call category management. That's the paper that I asked you to read. It's an old paper, 1983, was written by Krajcik, but it's really used till now. So this paper, we are going to see that the author evaluate the degree of market complexity, and the other side, the value of this. By doing this, what we understand that one size does not fit all. We have to understand the market that we are buying and not getting exactly the same strategy with everybody. Okay, again, friends and colleagues, we don't have exactly the same approach. I'm not saying that I'm disregarding are not taking care of the colleagues, but I have a special attention to my friends. That's what we are going to do. So what we are going to evaluate in the first, I love this kind of a graph, right? So it's easier for us to comprehend. And also you can use this to show to your manager, to your director, to your boss, how you evaluate. You can use it, right? Don't worry. So in one side, you have the degree of the difficulty in the market, how difficult it is to find a supplier. So if there are a lot of suppliers, we can get, though the level is very low, it's not difficult to get suppliers. Oh, you know what, they are really hard. I have perhaps one or two available worldwide, so I can have perhaps a bottleneck here. And the other side is the degree of the profit impact. So, I mean, the value involved on that. So, again, imagine that I have been buying pens to my company. So, oh my, we have so many suppliers to pens, right? It's not something that is specific. So, the total amount of this will be peanuts. So, it's a non-critical item. I'm not going to stop the entire company because of that. In the other side, we can consider this supplier as a non-critical. Why? Because there are a lot of suppliers available. I can choose from one to another. And you know what? The total amount is not that much. So if I lose 10%, it will be peanuts on that. However, if I lose 10% in someone who is strategic, that is something. That is a lot of money. Strategic suppliers are the ones that are not, we don't have a lot of available supplier with exactly the quality I'm looking for. It's exactly the requirements that we need, the value that we recognize in the product or the service, and the amount of money involved is high. Okay, that's strategic. That's what we call a strategic partner, a strategic supplier. You know what I mean? But we have other kind of suppliers that we have to consider at all. Imagine a business that we don't have a lot of suppliers. We can get one or two only available to attend us or ready to attend us, but the amount involved is really low. So it's a bottleneck. If this supplier disappeared or if they decide to not provide anymore or not manufacture the item anymore, I will be in serious problem, right? Even though that is low value, don't have any other alternative. So it's a bottleneck. It's something that I have to get a complete different strategy comparing to a strategic supplier or a non-critical one. And leverage is that when we have a lot of suppliers, that's the heaven for a purchaser, right? We have a lot of alternatives and the total amount involved is really high. That's the paradise. We're going to put the suppliers to bid and etc. Here's one example that we can use in our strategy. We can put in the same template all kind of a business, all different kind, depending on the business that you are or what you are buying. You can put all suppliers aside here and address different strategies for each one. For a bottleneck, for instance, remember, a bottleneck is the one who is critical, few suppliers, low volume, or low value. So we have to mitigate risk. So what we can do a supply contract, we can change specification, we can increase inventory just in case to make sure that we are going to have enough material for a specific period of time. So if the amount of money is low, perhaps increasing value is increasing inventory is not a big deal. For a non-critical supplier, here we have a non-critical, a lot of suppliers and low volume. The idea is to improve productivity so we can get what we call umbrella contracts, is that we can consolidate a lot of items with only one supplier. Remember, we are talking about aggregation. We can deploy some autonomy for internal users. We can allow them. So for instance, until $500, all internal users can place the orders. I don't need to be involved on that. We can get some automation or online ordering. So we have a contract in the system and the user only requests. So they have already done this. Leverage. Leverage, we have to maximize the value. So here we have to take the advantage of the value involved, and let's do it, let's work with that. And with the high number of suppliers also involved. So here we can get, for instance, a bid. It's not a big deal. I can get a bid and let the suppliers fight. I'm not going to distract on that. Okay? They are going to be competing with each other. And the last one is strategic sourcing. So here we have a competitive advantage. Here we're going to share intelligence, share information. We're going to establish long-term collaboration. Here we have something that we need to use even more, the determinants of value, to be successful, not only for our business, but also must be successful for the supplier. Okay? Wonderful. But in the next class, we also we are going to understand the other side. We need to make sure that our suppliers are also happy with our business. Okay, strategic sourcing is not only thinking about our point of view. We have to consider this, but not only my point of view. But I also have to consider the supplier perspective. But that's something for the next class. Okay, thank you very much for joining, and I hope you had fun with this class today.